It is Monday, April the 1st, and welcome to the Civic Union, a collaboration between the Department of Communication Studies at Cal Poly Humboldt and KZZH, uniting the people of Humboldt County with their elected representatives and community helpers. As always, we would love to hear from you. You can drop an email to thecivicunion@gmail.com. We will read and respond to appropriate emails on the air. Maybe you know someone representing your community that we could profile on the show. Give it a try. That's the Civic Union, all one word, at gmail.com. Or you can text us. That's right, it's new. We're pre-recording this interview, but in almost every other case, the number is 707-498-4146. Again, 707-498-4146. Send us questions via text message for our guest, current or former. We'll do our best to read those and get them answered live on the air as well. Joining us today is Alex Stillman, the City Council member and Vice Mayor for the City of Arcata. Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us this evening.
Well, thank you for asking me to join you.
We usually start just by trying to get to know the candidate a little bit. The first question, how long have you lived in Humboldt County, and what brought you here? When did you move, if you did?
Well, I moved to Humboldt County in 1971 as an older student, and I went to Humboldt State. Then, it's had many names since I came up here. I was a home economics major, which is no longer in existence at the university, but we had courses that are now over in the education department. And I think there are some courses that are in other departments now from the home economics, especially early childhood development.
I would imagine the community has changed quite a bit since then, not just at the university, but all around. We're going to talk about some of those changes here as we go. In a just observation on that, there's just so much changing right now. It's probably always changing. Looking back, what kind of reflections do you have on those earlier years that you were here?
Well, the first time I came up to visit, I decided I was staying down on 11th and K, and I said, I'm just going to walk downtown and walk around. And I did, and there were a lot of vacant storefronts, and I didn't see anyone out walking, and only one car. It was, of course, on a Sunday morning, about 8:30 in the morning, but I was pretty amazed by that. I had grown up in a rural town. It's hard to believe it's rural anymore, but in Scottsdale, Arizona, when there was only one paved street, and that was Scottsdale Road, everything else was dirt. The high school had 200 students in it, and it covered a vast area for us to go to school. Many of us were over 10 miles away. So I think I came up here and I go, well, I could live here as easily as anywhere else. And I was coming from San Francisco, where I lived out in the avenues, and the buses ran from 6 a.m. until midnight, and there was always people on the street, and it wasn't a quiet place. But up here it was sort of so different when I first came up here and visited. So, of course, I've seen many, many changes and have worked for a lot of changes, too.
I'm pretty sure you've had several stints on the city council, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. When did you first run for city council? When was that?
Well, when I came up here, I had met a professor who was in social welfare, and Ben Fairless. And so we had a party of faculty at the house one night. And so one of the professors who was in political science said, you should really consider running for city council. Well, I grew up in a family of volunteerism, and we started when we were 15, when we were old enough to finally be able to volunteer in certain areas. My mother had us out doing that. And my father had been involved in politics. He always worked on different things for the Democratic Party. And I have been involved in an organization in San Francisco where you had to put so many hours in every month just to meet the qualifications in the volunteerism. So I thought, I said, well, let me think about it. Let me see what to do. His name was Don Dixon. He later went to Sonoma State. And he said, no, you should really do it. This is the time. So I checked it out, and there were 13 of us that ran for 3 seats. I came in third. I was the first woman to run. It was the first time 18-year-olds had the vote. So for me, it was all really good. And the other thing is, it was a change in it was a time of environmentalism. And so we had the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, and we were running, or anyway, I was running on an environmental sort of platform. And one thing was to stop the freeway at 4 lanes. And there was a group working in Arcata to stop at 4 lanes. And so they endorsed me, and they did a lot of walking door to door. And the 13 of us running for the 3 seats, 2 of us came, well, on their ballot. I think I was the only one that was elected from the Stop at 4 poster, which is up in the archives at Humboldt.
Very cool.
And so Wesley Chesborough 2 years later got elected to the city council. And the 2 of us did a lot of lobbying in Sacramento before the transportation committee, et cetera, to see if we could scale the freeway back, because they wanted to build 3 lanes on either side instead of 2. As it was, we lost probably 200 living units because of the freeway expansion. And a lot of them were in pretty bad shape because Caltrans had been buying them, but not keeping them up, of course. And 17th Street, which is up by, the Fairwinds Motel, if you know where that is, it went straight across up to Library Circle. So now when you think about where it was, there was a stop sign, or it was a stoplight actually, and you just went across, I can't remember, I think it was probably maybe 2 lanes of traffic, and then you were in the libraries, going up the hill to Library Circle.
Wow.
So you can just imagine how big the swath is compared to what it was.
Yeah. They
called 17th Street because you'd be driving your car from Trinidad or something, out of the blue, here's a stop sign, and they called it Blood Alley because there were accidents there, because it was an unknown kind of thing. It was an expressway. So anyway, we were able to scale it back to 4 lanes, 2 on either side, and that was a bonus. We were never able to really get them to do much about Sunset Interchange, but 50 years later, now Sunset Interchange is being looked at because we felt like there were issues with it, definitely. But I guess enough was enough as far as Caltrans was concerned at that time. And then, which was just happened recently, a few weeks ago, the Caltrans issued funds for 3 projects in California, 3 projects that were affected by the freeway expansions. And so one was down in the San Diego area, another one is in South San Francisco, and we're the 3rd. And we're a rural community that received these funds. So it was a collaboration between Cal Poly and Humboldt and various other people in our community that work in transportation, HTA, Humboldt Transit Authority, and so they all worked on this. They told us that it was one of the best grants they'd ever gotten, and which was thrilling. Our city engineer, Nitra Katra, was really involved in it, and so that's our future. It's going to be about 5 acres of land that will be reuniting both sides of the freeway, so the east and the west. Was there something is sort of divided, and you think about it, and we used to years ago there used to be a creek going through there, but you could walk over whatever. I read stories about when people came here in the 1800s, and there was a board that went across the creek, and they could walk across to get over to their sisters, and they just came in from Sweden on a ship out on the bay where you have the wharf, which was the first railroad in California, because we had the first railroad in California, and that was that 2-mile wharf that went out with the train on it. So anyhow, you may want to ask me something else.
I do. It's so fascinating to hear just all the different transportation projects, and in particular your description of 17th there by the Fairview, I guess is what it's called. You said across the Library Circle. I walk that stretch, and to imagine it going straight across, that's just wild to think about. That would be very different indeed to have to cross the freeway like that. So I'm glad that's fixed. You'd mentioned this a little bit in your answer. Were there people in your life that encouraged you to run for office? It sounds like you had a poli-sci professor, you said Don Dixon, and that your parents brought you up in like a culture of volunteerism. Like, how did those people in particular, motivate you to be involved in this kind of work?
Well, so when I came here before I started school, I came out of, I picked up a lower division from San Francisco City College, and they were on semester and we were on a quarter system at that time up here at Humboldt State, Cal Poly. And so I had this gap of time. So I figured, what am I going to do? So I went to the Open Door Clinic, which was just starting. It was where the Tin Can Mailman is now. Huh. And I asked if they needed a volunteer for anything, and I was a suicide prevention volunteer in San Francisco. So I took over helping them with their hotline and got quite involved with the Open Door Clinic in the very beginning, because it was completely different. I mean, it has its basis started there, and look where it's become and what it's done now. It's one of our major servers of medical.
Yeah, okay, brand new facility there on Foster. It's looking pretty fancy.
Yes, it's really good. And the one over in Tidd Street is really great. And so's the one in Fortuna. They're all really good. So I would say, I was looking for what I was going to do in volunteerism later. So I thought, okay, well, this would be a volunteer project, being on the city council. And I was going to school. I had 2 children. And so I decided to do that, and I was elected, and I really enjoy being on the council. I really enjoy serving the community. So I served those 2 terms from 1972 to 1980, and I was off the council for 26 years. I'm really involved in historic preservation and restoring buildings. And I started doing that early on. I did that while I was on the city council in the 70s. And for the next 26 years, I worked on economic development projects. I had 2 stores.
Wow.
In retail, and got involved in historic preservation as far as the Historical Site Society of Arcata. Also, we were able to acquire one of the oldest buildings in Arcata, which is where the Phillips House Museum is. Okay. And so I'm still involved in that. And whatever.
It's exciting to hear about all of the different projects. When you ran for office in the 70s, is it the same as now? Like, you've run for office at different periods of time. And usually we ask just like, what do you do when you run for office? Like, just take us through that process. But I'm also just curious, like, how it's changed, if it has.
Well, definitely. We were really environmentally sensitive. That's why we have the Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary. Yeah. That's why we have the sewer treatment plant, because that was another big fight that we had. Our city manager at the time, Roger Story, said, one day I'll tell you when I think we can win. Meanwhile, I'll be the devil's advocate. We had 3 professors come from up at Cal Poly to help us work on this project. So I'm assuming the same thing is going to happen as far as reconnecting Arcata, that we'll have professors that'll be in engineering department or whatever. They're going to want to step forward and help us with that project. Yeah. So those 3 professors, they have things named after them at the Marsh. And so it was a very, very exciting time in the 80s, and all the things that we were able to do. And they set the tone for Arcata for its future. And I believe that that's our basis, and I believe we still are moving along in that direction. So, I said 26 years, and then all of a sudden, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's really important for cities to stay directed. They have to think about the fact that what are their services? Their services are streets and police and taking care of parks, etc. And at the time, some of the council members were really dealing with the president and wanting changes there. And you really have to work at local government. If you want change, you should be working at local government to make the changes, because we can't make changes in the world or nation. We can make them at the local government level. And if they do well, other people will pick them up. And that's exactly what's happened with our wastewater treatment system. Other people have picked that system up and they are using it in different parts of the world and the United States.
You're listening to KZZH 96.7 FM Eureka. This is the Civic Union, and we're talking with Arcata City Council member and Vice Mayor Alex Stillman. Take us through how you run for office. Do you like to get out and talk to as many people as possible? What does that look like? What's that process like?
Well, it's walking door to door. A lot of it is doing that. You know, things now, there's a lot of social media that certainly wasn't around before.
Yeah.
So this last time when I'm on a 2-year term because one of the council members left the area due to issues of, I think it was health. And so I thought, well, I could see if I could pick up that term, because we had a relatively new council. And when I was on the council before, we hired Karen Deemer as the city manager. And then I was thinking we were having a lot of difficulties with one of the city council members that was on there, and the harassment, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, you know, stabilization is important, and I like government, and I feel like I can be a stabilizing force. And so that's why I ran. And I was fortunate. I have friends that wanted to walk door to door, and I had a new friend who hadn't really seen a lot of Arcata. So I asked her, do you want to walk these different areas with me and learn more about the city? And she says, yes. So I was very fortunate, because the both of us, you move much faster if you have two people.
I bet. Are you a pretty outgoing person? Do you like talking to neighbors, or is it a bit of a challenge for you to do that?
I think I'm both ways. Just sometimes I'm more gabby than other times.
Sure. Okay. What would you tell listeners who are out there right now who've never considered getting involved in local politics, but they might be interested in getting started? Where would you point them? What would you say?
Well, I would say that one of the most important things is the Planning Commission. So if you can't get on the Planning Commission right away, I would say looking at one of the other committees that we have, perhaps the Transportation Committee, because that's a really important one. We have several others. We have wetlands, and we have the Forestry Committee. Well, that's pretty much, those people stay there for life, and they're great, and they follow they have to follow certain areas of expertise, and we have that on that committee, and they advise us on the Redwood Park and additions to the Redwood Park and also Jacoby Creek Forest. But that's where I would start. And the Planning Commission, I often wish I hadn't been on the Planning Commission, because that's the basis of where your general plan is. And if you know what's going on at that level, stepping onto the council makes all those planning issues when they come to you so much easier.
You are listening to KZZH 96.7 FM. This is the Civic Union, a collaboration between the Department of Communication Studies at Cal Poly Humboldt and Access Humboldt, uniting the people of the county with their elected officials and community helpers. Today we're talking with Arcata City Council member and Vice Mayor Alex Stillman. You just spoke to us about the Planning Commission and the Transportation Committee. I'm here on the Arcata City website. It's City of Arcata. That's all one word. Cityofarcata.org. And there's a section called Committees and Commissions. And I would imagine that this is where people go if they want to get involved with those kinds of things. Is that the best place to go? Is there?
Yes. Well, another thing is we do advertise it. So in the 70s, all the committees, what we actually had, the Planning Commission was basically the only thing that we had at the time. The mayor made all the appointments. And so one day I said, why do we advertise? There's so many people out there that would like to be on these different committees. And, you know, we don't know all of them, but if we advertised it, which we still do, then you have applicants coming forward who have expertise or interest, and then you can interview them and you can get a wider group of people that you may not actually socially know or know through whatever means. So we still use that and we advertise. It's on what you're looking at. You can see the committees that we have, but we put out press releases and it goes out on Instagram and Facebook when we have openings on committees.
Yeah, once again, cityofarcata.org. The Planning Commission link is there. There's vacancies and applications for all of the committees that you can find. If folks get involved in those committees, what's that time commitment look like? Is it a huge job, or is it something that people can do with fairly minimal or modest commitment, perhaps?
I would say probably fairly modest. You have a meeting a month. Your meeting could be a couple of hours a month. You may have some work to do around that. Before I came back on the council, I was on the Historic Preservation Committee. Of course, that's up my bailiwick because of that. And so when you have items coming onto your agenda, you want to go and research them. You want to take, like on that committee, you want to go take a look, see what's going on, what's the neighborhood like, what's the structure like. If you're on transportation, you're going to be thinking about the streets and the roads and bus system, etc. So it just depends on which committee you're on and what your interests are and how you're going to do some of your research around what you're going to be having come forward to you and what interests you want to bring forward to.
One of the things we try to do here in segment 2 is just to kind of get to know the position. In this case, we're talking about the Arcata City Council. If you have an office, where is it? And what does it look like, and how does it work?
We just got an office. We have several council members that wanted an office. And I said, what about the transit office? Down in the transit center, there was an empty office. And it had been used for other uses. And our former police chief thought he was going to use it as an auxiliary office. And so he didn't, but he had his stars and his stripes were all down there. And I said, I'll just take it and get it ready. So I did. I peeled off vinyl, etc., hung artwork, cleaned out the cupboards, figured things out. And then we have an office and we have keys to it. And I don't have a schedule that's online that I know of where you can figure out, who's there now or what. But there is an office and you can call council members and you can meet down at the transit center with them whenever you can set up a time that works.
You can give us the official answer, or you can give us your version of this answer. What is your job description as a member of the Arcata City Council?
Well, it's to be a leader and in your community. You have a job description. I've never thought of it quite like that.
On the spot, yeah.
You have a lot of duties besides right now we're going into goal setting, and we start goal setting next week. And goal setting is what happens, and it's how you start things. So without it, you don't know what your directions are going to be and how you're going to look at your budget and be able to budget items for things to happen in the city. And so it takes a long time. Right now there's a stir going on about 8th and 9th Street around the co-op.
Yeah.
But that was planning all happened in 2008. But before you get all, you get all the funding, the money to be able to put those together, it takes time. So one day I was walking down the street with some friends and they said, why don't you hurry up? I said, I'm just getting ready to walk at the pace of government. And it's slow and you have to adjust to it, because when you're in private sector, you're an entrepreneur, you can push things along really fast as you can pull it together. But when you're in government, there is many, many things that you have to do and meet before you can get something to happen. And it just like the streets by co-op. That was quite a while. I would say, that was a project that took close to 6 years. We see that happening all the time. It's just what it takes. Once you come up with your goal and you say, this is what we want to do, and then you budget it and staff figures out the time for it, and then they start working on it. Okay, no, for us to be able to do this, we're going to need a grant. Then you have to write a grant and you have to get approvals on that. And then you have to go out to bid for the whatever is going to be built. And then you go through that process, then it happens. And so it takes time. It's not lickety split.
It seems like it's the kind of thing that has lots to do on the daily level, but that you don't necessarily see it kind of pan out until quite a bit later.
I didn't really answer your question, did I?
That's okay. You can take another shot at it if you want. Go for it.
I just wanted to let you know that's part of it. Study sessions, you have those. You have your homework to do. You have citizens contacting you, asking about this and that. You have to do research on that. Everybody on the council serves on a joint powers agreement organization. And we have several of those. And then you can be liaisons to certain organizations also. So those are outside commitments from your council meetings, studying for your council meetings, preparing for that as additional. So it takes quite a bit of time, I would say. And that's one of the things we used to always worry about, is because of having our meetings too early in the day or whatever it might be. If you work full time, you're not going to be able to do it. It makes it very difficult. But fortunately, things have sort of adjusted, and it does work out now that usually nothing starts until after work, 5:30, after, assuming people have a 8 to 5 job.
Yeah, that's
working shifts.
That's something we talk about quite a bit on this show. We interview like mayors and things, and people find out that they have day jobs that they do. They don't just become the mayor and do that full time. And so this question here can obviously be kind of a little complicated, but it's just like, walk us through a day at work as a city council member. Like, do you really conceive of your job that way? Is it the kind of job that you feel like you punch in and you punch out? Or is it kind of more ambient work that you're constantly doing? And what does that kind of look like day to day?
I think you're doing things all the time, off and on all the time. It's not like you get up in the morning and you go for 8 to 5 all week long. You have a 40-hour week. You don't have that. Staff has that.
Yeah.
And staff is preparing things and dealing with the issues if the council's brought forward or if the budget has laid out and they're fulfilling those goals. But the council, we have the meetings and we have our joint powers agreements that we go to. And right now I'm on HTA, Humboldt Transit Authority. And so from that, I'm on 2 other committees, and I've become the vice chair for Humboldt Transit. And I had no idea that they have a special meeting to prepare for the agenda. Oh, okay. So there's another meeting I didn't expect. And because they're involved in the Earth Center, and they've been really trying for a long time to get the additional partners together for that, finally, I think we have a partner. So I'm going to be helping with the Earth Center and being on that committee. So we've had one meeting. I'm assuming we'll have more in the future as things move along. And so you never know what's going to happen out of that. It was like, I just go to HTA once a month, and I'm there in 2 hours or something, and that's it. But now I've added several other hours to it, but I'm happy about it because Arcata was the first county. We had the first bus system, and we started that in the 70s.
Wow! And
it was Mad River Transit, which we still have. You see those yellow red buses running around.
I ride those buses, and they are awesome. Yeah.
And you're on our newest one. So I've always been for transit from the very beginning. And so I still am. And I always like to be on HTA. And I was on HTA when I was on the council in 2006. Huh. So anyway, it's vital. Can I speak or you?
Yep,
okay.
Go ahead.
It's vital as we get more development, and I'm really into housing, of course, because in historic preservation, when I was remodeling places, I always figured I could get another 2 units out of it, the main unit plus 2 others, so that we could have more housing. And So, I've done my bit, but it's small. I'm not a developer, so I'm not building, like Kramer's project on Sunset or anything of that nature. So I figure over the years, I probably have been able to accumulate maybe 30 units altogether.
Wow.
And so doing it, just one house, whatever, at a time. But so I'm still really interested in housing. I've met with all of the new developers in the area. We have conversations about where they could build, what land. I'm always checking things out, thinking about it, contacting them and letting them know about opportunities or vice versa. They're asking me questions. How do I find this person or that? Because I think it's important for us to get the housing level that we need, because we've never been able to recapture what we lost in the 70s when the freeway went through. When you lost 200 units, how do you make that up? You just keep building, but you never, ever are going to make that up. And
Yeah.
so I know that people have gotten really used to having a high amount of money for rent here. And I think eventually when we get enough housing, we're going to find sweet spots, and they won't be where they have been. And it's going to be an adjustment for people to accept that. And I've had rental units for a long time, and I know I'm always below market rate rents, and my tenants never leave. So I would say that they go to college and now they're working in the schools, and they've been there for ages. So they seem happy.
You're listening
so you
to
may
this.
have another question.
I do. You're listening to the Civic Union on KZZH 96.7 FM Eureka. We're talking to Arcata City Council member Alex Smith. Alex Stillman. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. I know that the public can come and comment at the regular city council meetings, and if I'm not mistaken, here at the city webpage here, it says the next regular meeting, it says, is on April 3rd at 6 p.m. in the council chamber. Is that the primary place that you go to engage the public, or where else do you meet the public, or if they want to find you, where can they find you?
Well, our council meetings are all in the council chambers, and we meet the first and third Wednesdays of the month. And, we all have phone numbers. I just use my regular phone number, my cell phone number, so people can call me. And we all have emails, and so we're accessible. But that's not where do people find us? On the street. In the store, in the grocery store, at the, wherever, you're out and about, and people, so it's like, okay, you're out to dinner. Usually people never bother you. Like you maybe wouldn't bother someone out to dinner, like whatever. So you can have your own, you can have a life. But I have friends, and they said, oh gosh, I would never want the public to know, I'm private. And I realize I'm not private.
It would be hard with your phone number on the webpage there, right there, just for folks to call.
Yes.
I see it right here. I won't say it out loud, but it is at the cityofarcata.org if people want to go.
So I've never been, you can ask me things and I'll tell you whatever it is. And I haven't been a person that has to, I don't know. I'm open, I guess you'd say. I don't have those issues.
What kinds of misconceptions do you run into about being a city council member? Are there things that you think that people expect from the city council that maybe aren't what you're there for, or just other basic misunderstandings about what you do?
Well, I think people want us to do things that we're not capable or able to do as a city, or to take action on. And we all have our issues about whatever it might be, and how we can make those things happen. Maybe we can't, and so people will be upset about that. We do have we're looking at having our utility users tax on the next ballot in November, and that's going to be an increase. And we just had a survey on that, and we'll be talking about that at goal setting on April 2nd, about whether we want to move forward. And we know, we in Arcata made a decision not to have big box stores. So if you look at Eureka, they have all those big box stores, and they have Costco. Can you imagine how much money Costco brings in sales tax? So we have to be frugal. We have to be careful. Whereas Eureka, I heard somebody say the other day, oh, we have plenty of money. Well, of course they do. When you look at Target, you look at all the big other stores. If you only had Costco, you would be in great shape. But we got into this about not wanting a lot of chain restaurants and not wanting a big box stores, and that happened a long time ago. And so that has made a difference in how we look, for one thing. And the other is it's definitely affected our bottom line. That's why you have to shop local.
It's one of my favorite things about living here, honestly. We moved here in 2015, and I really love the small town feel. I grew up in Helena, Montana, which is a city of 50, 60,000 people, and there's no bus system there at all. And I moved to Arcata, which is quite a bit smaller than that, and it had a bus system, and I was so pumped about that. So kudos to y'all for these choices. I know they're not easy. They are expensive and time-consuming, but it makes a difference for folks like me for sure. What is your favorite part about working for the city?
Oh, well, I'm a networker. I think that's one of my attributes. And I like to hear things and know what's going on. And then people ask me questions and I can figure out how to connect them or how things can be done or explore various ideas about how we could do something that, I don't know. It's just, I like that a lot. That's something I really enjoy. So for me, I've always enjoyed that. And I think I'm not bad at it. And I think we'll have good outcomes. And I feel like over the years and my service to the city, we've had good outcomes, whether I'm in the public sector or the private sector.
What one or two tips would you give folks who are out there that do not care at all about local politics? They're like, what is the point about getting involved in politics? How would you answer that question?
Vote.
Succinct.
Well, if you don't have to be involved in daily politics. I mean, it's or watching every meeting online or going to meetings or so forth. But you should vote because then you have people in office. If you're voting for those that you think are going to do a good job and fulfill the obligations of being on a city, taking care of a city, then you've done your job. You voted.
You are listening to KZZH 96.7 FM. This is the Civic Union, a collaboration between the Department of Communication Studies at Cal Poly Humboldt and Access Humboldt, uniting the people of the county with their elected officials and community helpers. We're talking today with Arcata City Council member and Vice Mayor Alex Stillman. Alex, thank you again for taking the time. I'm looking at your page here on the Arcata City Council. You've talked about quite a lot of this as we've been chatting, but you started as a council member, it says, in 1972. You've been the mayor. You've been the vice mayor. You've served on the Transit Authority, the Hazardous Materials Response JPA, the Friends of the Arcata Marsh. The private sector accomplishments is extensive. The past community service, just wow, what a list of things that you have been doing. Liaison to the Arcata House, liaison to the Sister City Committee, the Redwood Coast Energy Authority. It just goes on and on and on. How do you pick what to do next? Do the things come to you, or do you pick something you want to do and do that?
Well, in the government, you all have to choose which one you're going to be on, who's going to be on this one or that one. I was on REDEC for years, and I was the signer for REDEC. That's what Greg Foster always wants to remind me, that when we started the REDEC, Redwood Regional Economic Development Corporation, in the 70s, I was the mayor at the time, and we signed those papers, and REDEC is still in operation. He tells people, but she's the only living one that signed those papers.
Wow.
Oh dear. So, but can you stop for a second? Because yeah. I just thought you were asking me about how I choose things.
Yeah.
But we have to choose. We all have to divvy up. And when you're on a JPA, you learn a lot about something you may know nothing about. And I think that that's always good, because then you pick up a whole different understanding of something that we have going on in our county, which is important. And so I think the JPAs are great. I've always liked being on them. I've been on different ones over the years, which I'm very fortunate to have been able to do that. And so I sort of when I came back on the council this time, I wanted to stick with HTA because I know how important transportation is, and I know how important housing is, and they go hand in hand. So if you don't have enough housing, then you don't need as many buses. And so you have to work together. And that's why I work both in housing and transportation, because I think the both are extremely important. And you have to have both of them. They have synergy.
One of the projects that you talked about, you said that the city received a grant. And if I'm not mistaken here, reading what you sent me, that we're going to try to reconnect Arcata somewhere between 14th and Sunset there. Can you talk us through a little bit about what that might look like? He says it's pretty exciting, and it sounds great.
Yeah, I brought that up in the very beginning, but so the division, we were talking about the division of the freeway and how wide it is.
Yeah.
So the idea is to be able to reconnect two sides of the freeway into one. And it'll be about 5 acres of land, somewhere in there. And it can have housing on it. It could have the transit. We could move the transit system, could be up there, because you're going to be connected to both sides. It's not going to be like you go down and you come up. It's going to be even somewhat.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm going to assume it's going to be somewhat even. And so I think we're going to be spending some time figuring out the different things that'll happen. But HCA was involved in part of that granting, working on that grant, and it would make sense to have our transit center there, our connection for our area. We wouldn't have to have the bus stop up in the Cal Poly area by the library anymore, because it could be then you could just walk a few blocks and you'd be right on campus. And so I don't know if I'll ever see the end of the fruition of it, but I'm really excited to see it happening. I'm really excited to think that our going back in the 70s and working so hard to scale down the freeway made it a possibility that this could happen. We would have had such a wide swath if we had 3 lanes on each side, expanding to 4. So I feel like in some ways, Wesley and I made a big difference for our future in Arcata 50 years later, and never really expected something this magnificent to happen to us.
Well, I wasn't here then, but I've read a little bit about just the politics of development. And I know there's always people that want to widen the freeways, and they always say it's going to make traffic easier, and it almost never does. It's just more traffic on wider freeways, and it is unpopular and difficult to keep them the way they are. So I just want to underscore what you're saying, that it's an accomplishment for you and the folks on the council back then that's paying dividends decades later. And I think that kind of forward-thinking transportation planning is part of what makes Arcata special for me anyway. I feel that. Let's talk just a little bit about housing if we can. We're kind of running out of time here, but this is something that I think a lot of people are really worried about. What are your thoughts in terms of how the city is responding to housing right now? What do you see in the future as far as like what we can potentially look forward to?
Well, back in 2000, we picked up Happy Valley, and a lot of people don't know where that is, but it's over off of West End Road. And one of the reasons we had a redevelopment agency. Redevelopment agencies went away, but when you had the development agencies, you were able to purchase land. And so we still have this land, and we're going through the process of making sure that maybe the Happy Valley property would be, the goal was to put it into, have it in industrial or for tech companies or something of that nature. So when I look at the Gateway area and especially on K Street, and I think about some of the businesses that are there, they could easily, if we could figure out how to put it all together, they could actually move to Happy Valley and do very well there. And then that would open up that area for housing. And it's within easy walking distance of the downtown. And so I feel good about it. I feel like over the years in the 70s, when I was out walking door to door on Spring Street, this woman said to me, "So when I get older, I want to have an apartment to move into, a condo or something. I don't want to maintain this big house."
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I was out in 2006 and there she is again. She's working her yard and she says, "You never did it." And I'm living in this big house. My husband died and I've had cancer and I survived it and I'm not happy. You've never been able to get me a place. So my feeling is this is going to be good for us. And I'm looking forward to having some of them as condominiums. And so you can have home ownership. And we have young people that all they want is a small condo. They want a large studio condo. And other people, probably my age or younger, they may want 2 bedrooms and have their grandchildren come and stay with them or their sisters or whomever it might be. So I look forward to having it. And I know there's a fear of parking, but no longer does retail operate the way it used to in the past. You don't need the big stores and you can have parking behind buildings. If you have retail or cafe or what in the front, you have plenty of room in the back. And then we'll be able to have bus system with more buses running. We'll also be able to see shared car riding, which is something that's going on in a lot of countries. Well, I don't mean countries, states, I should say, and cities. And I think that's something we definitely want to do. And I think that'll be so beneficial because not everyone needs a car all the time and you can car share. So I'm excited about it. And as I said earlier, I know the developers, I talk to them and I want them to succeed and have us put projects together that'll work really well for us.
Do you get a lot
Is that what people are afraid about?
I think, people are afraid that there's not enough housing, obviously, and that's a big part of it. But then once we start building more housing, people are afraid that Arcata is going to lose that small town feel. It's like one thing to put in an 8-story or a 6-story building, but it's another thing to have several of those in a town that's pretty small. And personally, individually, I'll say I'm all for it. The new student development's going in right behind my house, and I need the noise to stop. But when it's done, I will appreciate that folks have somewhere to live, and I think that's very important. And, it's a different view than it was before, and it's a pretty substantial change, but I can't argue that that's as important as people having housing. And I'm just curious how you navigate kind of the pushback or navigate trying to thread the needle between building enough housing for everyone and keeping Arcata like the small little town that everybody seems to love. And maybe that's not possible. I don't know.
Well, I think first of all, we won't have 8-story buildings. I think nowadays the max would be 7. But then construction technology will also be something that'll determine what the buildings are like and how tall they are and what will they be using, what kind of construction can they do, and elevators, and there'll be a lot of conditions and thoughts about how things are going to be handled. But I do think having form-based codes is something that in the historic preservation area, they've been talking about that for years in different towns and meetings I would go to about how you could actually make the streets not so wide. You could have wider sidewalks and street trees. If you have additions or new buildings built, they follow the form that you have within the street area. So I know, back in the, I don't even, what year, maybe, I don't even think I was on the council when I was going to meetings, and it was before 2006. And I came back talking about form-based codes. Well, it's taken us a long, long time to get there. And I think that'll be valuable, but I don't, there could be, I say to people, well, what would it be like to have more cafes on the top floor? What would it be like to have a library that was on the top floor? Or a library in the gateway, because this gate, the library is fairly small, and you could have a library and a art gallery and a cafe. Who knows what's going to happen? But I think it's very exciting. It's going to be, we have to think about the future. When I was in the council in the 70s, I used to always talk about my grandchildren and what would things be like for them and how I should really be thinking about the future. And of course, I have grandchildren that live here, and one's going to be 24 and the other one's going to be 21. And so I actually have them, and it's happened. And I think we have to think about our future, and we have to do it well. And I think we can. And so we will have housing. It'll be different. Maybe we won't have, storage units where we have storage units. It could be housing instead. It just varies. And I'm hopeful.
Rooftop cafes in Arcata. That sounds nice. I'm here for that. That sounds very cool.
I think it's a possibility.
Yeah, we got beautiful sunsets here and some pretty good views. And I think that sounds very, very exciting. We're running out of time. This is probably the last question. What are you most excited about looking ahead as far as what's on the horizon for either the city of Arcata or the county? What do you look forward to?
Well, I think one thing we're going to be really working on in the future is that reconnecting Arcata. And I think that's going to be a very exciting thing because we're so landlocked. We have the bay, we have the bottom, which we don't want to go into and build in. We have the forest. We have the river, Mad River. So as far as land, we are really constrained. And by bringing in, connecting the two sides of the freeway is going to give us an ample land to be able to add additional building. And I think that'll be really healthy for us and really good. And I think for business to be successful, you have to have people around that are going to use them. So if you have a restaurant, you have to have someone that's going to go and eat there. Or if you have a store, and you need a population base to be able to support your businesses and to have good businesses. So it's all connected, and we have to continue to think that way. And if we really want to be, if we're a person that wants to be so isolated, a person who doesn't like Cal Poly, doesn't like what they've done, then we shouldn't be here. We need to move. There's so many towns that are desperate for people to live in them. In the Midwest, they're desperate. They've lost their population basis. And so there are other places to go that are sleepy and not driving behind the wheel in a hurry or whatever. And so we have, life is life and change is change. And people don't like change, but every day there's a change. The flowers change, the shrubs change, everything. And so the only constant we really have in life is change.
I love that the birds come and go. We're right on a big migration pattern, and the birds come and the birds go. And some of them have been here forever, but by and large, they pass through. And they got that marsh. It's a good place for them to go. And again, we had to fight to make that happen, as you said.
And Godwood Days is coming up. We're going to have Godwood Days April 12th, 20th, and 21st. And we have a great registration, and we have a good speaker, and we're going to be having the zoo talk about all the things that they've been doing to increase bird habitat at the zoo, and they will be our speakers on Friday night.
I'm constantly cleaning my van with the things the birds leave behind, but I'm just so excited to see them come through. It's just fun noise and cool birds. Godwit Days. One more time, what was the dates for that? Can you throw it out one more time?
It's April 19th, 20th, and 21st at the Arcata Community Center. And you can go on to godwitdays.org and you can see what trips are available. And we're doing very well in selling out trips. Of course, we have some exciting ones like Spotted Owl. And then we will have later in the season, we'll have be going out to the ocean. But this time of the year, it's really iffy. And so pelagic tours or something, I always say, no, not now, but we can do them in October and they'll be excellent. We'll actually be able to get out.
You either get rained out or carried away by the king tide, I feel like, is kind of what you're facing if you go out now. Who knows what's going to happen?
Or it's just too darn rough to be out there.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, Alex Stillman, it's been really, really wonderful talking to you. And then again, I just want to say, looking at everything you've done in this community for so long, just thank you for your time and for your patience and for your activity to make Arcata the community that it is. I live here and I just appreciate all the things you've done. So thank you for it.
Well, I should thank my mother. She said, no matter where you live, you have to give to your community. And I feel like I have met that obligation for my mother.
I would thank your mother too. Yeah, that's a great tip. No matter where you live.
I appreciate that she instilled that into us.
Yeah, no matter where you live, you have an obligation to your community. I definitely appreciate that. Well, this has been the Civic Union. It's a collaboration between KZZH and Access Humboldt and the Department of Communication Studies at Cal Poly Humboldt, trying to unite the people of the county with their representative government and community helpers. Once again, I'd like to thank Alex Stillman for joining us. Thanks to my producer, Nate Dogg. Have you missed any of our prior shows? Well, good news. Nate Dogg has put them all on YouTube. That's at the Civic Union over there, all one word, at the Civic Union on YouTube. Check it out. We've been running for over a year now. We did it. And there's a lot to learn about the folks who make our community hum. We will be back next month, 6 p.m., Monday, May the 6th, with more local people serving our community right here on 96.7 FM Eureka. Up next, certified animal behaviorist Charlotte Peltz gives you tips, tricks, and tools to make it work with the roommate who eats your brand new baseball cap that you just got for Christmas. It's living with your dog. Only on KZZH Access Humboldt Local Voices through community media.